Welcome to Mystery Manor Tales, dear listeners. I'm your host, Elias Thorne, and tonight I have a special treat for you. A brand new Hercule Poirot mystery, crafted in the timeless style of the Queen of Crime herself, Agatha Christie. If you're settling in for a long, relaxing evening, perhaps with a cup of tea by the fireside, you're in the right place. We'll dive into Fatal Secret of Saint-Gerard Abbey, a tale of locked rooms, hidden motives, and the brilliant little grey cells of our Belgian detective. Chapter 1. Whispers in the Mist. Introduction and Setup. The fog arrived first, rolling in from the Wiltshire Downs like a living thing. It curled around the ancient yew trees that lined the drive to Saint-Gerard Abbey, swallowing the gravel path in slow, deliberate mouthfuls until only the tops of the gateposts remained visible. Two stone saints, arms outstretched as though blessing the mist itself. By the time the Daimler's headlights pierced the murk, the abbey had become little more than a silhouette. A jagged crown of Gothic arches and crenellations pricked out against a pewter sky. Inside the motor car, Hercule Poirot adjusted the angle of his Homburg and peered through the windscreen with the mild irritation of a man who preferred his mysteries to arrive on schedule. The invitation from Sir Reginald Beaumont had been charmingly vague. A weekend of intellectual companionship and perhaps a small puzzle for your famous little grey cells. Yet Poirot disliked surprises of the meteorological variety. Fog, he reflected, was the accomplice of every second-rate criminal in England. "Mon Dieu, Hastings," he murmured. "One would think the English climate conspires to hide its own misdeeds." Captain Arthur Hastings, seated opposite in the jump seat, gave a sympathetic chuckle. He had arrived at the Abbey the previous evening by train, and had been dispatched to collect Poirot from the nearest station. Hastings wore the expression of a man who had already sampled the port and found it satisfactory. "Cheer up, old boy," he said. "Sir Reginald's place is straight out of a Wilkie Collins novel. Secret passages, haunted chapels, the lot. You'll be in your element." Poirot permitted himself a small, precise smile. "It is not the passages that intrigue me, mon ami, but the people who walk them." The car slowed. Iron gates creaked open at the touch of an unseen hand, presumably the lodge-keeper, though no figure emerged from the fog. Tires crunched over gravel, then over flagstones as the drive widened into a courtyard. The Abbey rose before them, 3 stories of honey-coloured stone, its windows glowing amber against the dusk. A single lamp burned above the great oak door, and beneath it stood a tall, bearded man in evening dress. "Poirot, welcome to Saint-Gerard." Sir Reginald Beaumont's voice carried easily across the courtyard, warm and resonant, the product of a lifetime spent lecturing to lecture halls and auction rooms alike. He was in his mid-50s, broad-shouldered, with a scholar's stoop and eyes the colour of winter seas. A neatly trimmed beard framed a mouth accustomed to smiling, though tonight the smile seemed a fraction too bright, as though pasted on for the occasion. Poirot descended, smoothing invisible creases from his overcoat. "Sir Reginald, your summons was irresistible. Flattery from the great Hercule Poirot." "I am honoured." Sir Reginald clasped his hand with genuine enthusiasm, then turned to Hastings. "Captain, you've delivered my guest safely. Come inside before the fog devours us all." They crossed the threshold into a vaulted entrance hall that smelled of beeswax, wood smoke, and something older, frankincense, perhaps, lingering from centuries of prayer. A fire roared in a hearth large enough to roast an ox. Above it hung a tapestry depicting Saint Gerard himself, tonsured and serene, holding a book whose pages appeared to writhe even in the woven threads. Hastings gave a low whistle. "Jolly impressive. Feels as though we've stepped back 500 years. 632 to be precise," Sir Reginald corrected amiably. The abbey was founded in 1295 by Cistercians fleeing persecution in France. The Beaumonts acquired it in 1834, after the last monk departed for more profitable pastures. "We've kept the bones, if not the spirit." He led them beneath an archway into the cloister garth, now roofed in glass to form a conservatory. Climbing roses clung to the stone pillars. Their late blooms perfumed the air. A fountain played softly in the centre, its water catching the lamplight in silver coins. Waiting beside the fountain was a woman of striking elegance. Lady Evelyn Beaumont wore a gown of midnight blue velvet that shimmered like the fog outside. Pearls, 3 strands, Poirot noted automatically, rested against a throat still youthful despite her 45 years. Her smile was practiced, but her eyes held the wariness of a deer scenting the wind. "Monsieur Poirot," she said, extending a gloved hand. "Reginald has spoken of you often. I confess I expected someone taller." Poirot bowed over her fingers with exquisite courtesy. "Madame, it is the mind that reaches, not the stature. I am delighted to make your acquaintance." A ripple of laughter escaped her. Genuine this time. "Touché. Come, let me present the rest of our little gathering before dinner." They moved into the great hall, where a long table had been laid for 8. Candlelight flickered over silver and crystal. The centerpiece was a bowl of late roses, whose petals matched the blood-red wine already breathing in the decanters. The other guests turned as one. First came Dr. Marcus Hale, a corpulent archaeologist with a booming voice and a waistcoat straining at its buttons. His handshake was damp, his eyes sharp behind pince-nez. "Poirot! Read your monograph on the Priory case. Brilliant deduction about the missing candlestick." Poirot inclined his head. "You flatter me, Doctor. I understand you and Sir Reginald collaborate on matters esoteric." Hale's laugh was a rumble. "Esoteric? Profitable, more like. There's a fortune in medieval manuscripts if one knows where to dig." Next, Miss Clara Voss, Sir Reginald's niece by marriage, an American heiress with bobbed auburn hair and a dress that would have scandalized a debutante of the previous decade. Her accent was pure transatlantic drawl. "Uncle Reggie promised me ghosts and gossip. So far, I've only had the ghosts." She flashed a smile that revealed perfect teeth, and a dimple Poirot suspected was weaponized. Monsieur Victor Lange followed, a Frenchman of indeterminate age, somewhere between 35 and 50 Poirot judged, with the sleek grooming of a diplomat and the watchful eyes of a card shark. His evening clothes were faultless, his bow minimal. "Enchanté, Monsieur Poirot. Your reputation precedes you across the Channel." Poirot's moustache gave the faintest twitch. "As does yours, Monsieur Lange. I believe we share an interest in incunabula." Lange's smile did not reach his eyes. Among other things, last came Brother Elias, the abbey's sole remaining monk. He was a slight figure in a patched brown habit, his tonsure a pale island amid grey stubble. His hands were calloused from years of tending the herb garden. His gaze, when it met Poirot's, was tranquil yet unreadable. "Peace be with you, my son," he murmured, and Poirot felt the benediction like cool water. Servants glided in with the first course, consommé clearest amber, scented with sherry. Conversation flowed as easily as the wine. Sir Reginald held court, describing his latest acquisition, the Codex of Saint-Gerard, a 14th-century manuscript rumoured to contain a fatal secret. "Legends claim it records the betrayal of the Abbey's founder," he said, leaning forward, so that candlelight carved shadows into his beard. A prior poisoned by his own brethren over a hidden reliquary. The chamber was locked from within, the key on the inside, yet death entered all the same. Dr. Hale snorted. Romantic twaddle. The reliquary's probably a hoard of silver plate melted down centuries ago. Or a cipher, Langer suggested softly. Codes were common in monastic scriptoria. Miss Clara shivered theatrically. I vote we hold a séance after dinner. The spirits might tell us where to dig. Brother Elias crossed himself. Mock not the dead, child. Some doors, once opened, do not close again. Lady Evelyn's laugh was brittle. Really, brother, you'll give us all nightmares. Reginald, must we discuss curses at table? But Sir Reginald's eyes gleamed. Curses, my dear, are merely puzzles wearing ecclesiastical robes. And puzzles, as our guest knows, are meat and drink to Hercule Poirot. Poirot raised his glass. To puzzles, then, and to their solutions. Dinner progressed through pheasant in truffle sauce, a lemon sorbet sharp enough to make Hastings wince, and a Stilton so ripe it threatened to walk off the board unaided. Port followed, then coffee strong as midnight. The party adjourned to the library, a cavernous room lined with oak shelves that groaned beneath vellum and leather. A fire crackled. Above the mantel, a portrait of a 15th-century abbot glared down with painted disapproval. Sir Reginald unlocked a rosewood cabinet and withdrew a parcel wrapped in silk. "Behold," he said, unwrapping it with reverence. The codex was smaller than Poirot expected, octavo size, bound in darkened calf, its clasp a twist of iron shaped like a serpent devouring its tail. The vellum pages crackled as Sir Reginald opened it to a miniature illumination. Saint-Gerard kneeling before a locked door, a dagger hovering in mid-air. "Note the impossibility," Sir Reginald murmured. "The saint is alone, yet death approaches." "The script beneath is in a cipher I've only partially decoded. It speaks of the betrayer who walks unseen." Dr. Hale leaned close, breath fogging his spectacles. "If I could examine it under better light." "Tomorrow," Sir Reginald promised, closing the book with a snap. "Tonight we celebrate its arrival." Outside, the fog pressed against the mullioned windows like a living shroud. Somewhere in the distance, a church bell tolled 11 slow strokes. Poirot sipped his coffee, observing the faces around him. Hale's hunger, Lange's calculation, Clara's excitement, Evelyn's brittle poise, Elias' quiet sorrow, and Sir Reginald's triumph, tinged with something Poirot could not yet name. Hastings yawned cavernously. "Bed for me, I think. Early start tomorrow. Sir Reginald promised a tour of the crypt." The party broke up with murmurs and good nights. Poirot lingered, watching Sir Reginald return the codex to its cabinet. The lock clicked shut with finality. "You are prudent, mon ami," Poirot observed. "Such a treasure invites attention." Sir Reginald's smile was thin. Attention is one thing, betrayal another. But here, in Saint-Gerard, the walls themselves keep watch. He clapped Poirot on the shoulder and departed, footsteps echoing down the corridor. The fire settled into embers. Somewhere above, a door closed. Poirot stood alone in the library, the scent of old books and candle smoke wrapping around him like the fog outside. He approached the cabinet, ran a gloved finger along the lock, solid, unbreached, yet. He turned to the portrait of the abbot. "You, mon père, saw many secrets. Perhaps you will see one more." A log shifted in the grate, sending up a shower of sparks. Poirot's shadow leapt across the shelves, distorted into something tall and monstrous before subsiding. Upstairs, in the monk's cell that served as Sir Reginald's study, a single lamp burned. The codex lay open on the desk, its serpent clasp glinting. Sir Reginald bent over the pages, quill scratching softly. Outside his door, the corridor stretched dark and silent. In the east wing, Lady Evelyn stood before her mirror, unclasping her pearls one by one. Each pearl fell into a velvet-lined box with a muted click. Her reflection stared back, pale and composed, yet her hand trembled as she reached for the last strand. In the guest suite, Miss Clara hummed a jazz tune while brushing her hair, the brush strokes keeping time with an invisible orchestra. On her bedside table lay a photograph of a young man with soulful eyes and a painter's smock. She kissed the image lightly, then slipped it beneath her pillow. Dr. Hale paced his room in carpet slippers, muttering figures under his breath. A ledger lay open on the bureau, columns of red ink marching relentlessly downward. Monsieur Lange sat at his window, smoking a Turkish cigarette and watching the fog. His valise stood open. Inside, nestled among silk shirts, gleamed a set of delicate lockpicks. Brother Elias knelt in the chapel, candlelight gilding the worn stone before the altar. His lips moved in Latin, but his eyes were fixed on a crack in the floor where once an iron ring had lifted a trapdoor to the crypt. And in the entrance hall, the grandfather clock struck midnight, 12 sonorous notes that seemed to linger in the rafters long after the hammer fell silent. Poirot, ascending the great staircase, paused on the landing. A draught stirred the tapestries. Somewhere, a window stood ajar. He listened. Nothing. Yet the little grey cells, those meticulous sentinels, were already at work, cataloguing faces, gestures, the precise angle of a smile. At the end of the west corridor, Sir Reginald's door closed with a soft thud. The key turned in the lock. Bolts slid home. 1, 2, 3. The lamp inside dimmed to a glow. Fog pressed thicker against the panes. Somewhere in the night, an owl called once, then was still. Poirot reached his own room, removed his gloves with deliberate care, and laid them across the chair. He did not undress immediately. Instead, he stood at the window, hands clasped behind his back, gazing into the impenetrable white. Impossible crimes, he murmured to the darkness, begin with impossible silences. Far below, in the cloister garth, the fountain continued its patient song. Water over stone, stone over secrets. And in the library cabinet, the codex waited, its serpent clasp tight, its pages whispering of betrayal yet to come. Chapter 2. The Shadow Falls. Arrival and Foreboding. Morning arrived at Saint-Gerard Abbey the way a cautious guest arrives at a party. Quietly, apologetically, and with the suspicion that it might not be entirely welcome. The fog had not lifted. If anything, it had thickened overnight, pressing against the leaded windows like wet wool. From the upper corridors, the view was of nothing but shifting greyness, as though the abbey floated in a cloud that had forgotten how to rain. Hercule Poirot descended the great staircase at precisely 8:30, his potent leather shoes making no sound on the worn oak treads. He had slept well. Poirot always slept well when a puzzle hovered at the edge of consciousness. But he had risen earlier than usual, drawn by the need to observe the house before its inhabitants imposed their personalities upon it. The entrance hall was empty save for the grandfather clock, whose pendulum swung with monastic regularity. Tick, tock, tick. The sound was oddly comforting, like the heartbeat of the building itself. Poirot paused at the foot of the stairs, gloved hands clasped behind his back. He noted the faint scuff marks on the flagstones, Hastings' heavier tread from last night. the lighter imprint of Lady Evelyn's evening slippers, the deeper gouge of Sir Reginald's walking stick. A servant had polished around them. The brass candlesticks gleamed, but the floor retained its stories. Nay. Poirot's moustache gave a small, satisfied twitch. Already the Abbey was speaking. From the cloister garth came the scent of coffee and bacon, mingling with the damp stone smell that never quite left the corridors. Poirot followed his nose into the conservatory, where breakfast was laid beneath the glass roof. The fountain still played its patient song. Droplets beaded on the rose leaves like tiny crystal balls. A long table had been set with white linen, silver chafing dishes, and a centrepiece of late Michaelmas daisies whose petals were the exact shade of Miss Clara Voss's lipstick. Captain Hastings was already attacking a plate of kippers with the enthusiasm of a man who believed breakfast to be the most important meal of the day. He looked up as Poirot entered, cheeks bulging. "Morning, old chap. Sleep well. Beastly fog still out there. Can't see the end of my own nose." Poirot slid into the chair opposite. The nose, Hastings, is not always the most reliable guide. Sometimes it is the eyes that deceive. He lifted the lid of a chafing dish and inhaled the aroma of scrambled eggs flecked with chives. Ah, Madame Beaumont's cook understands the importance of simplicity. Lady Evelyn herself entered moments later, followed by a maid carrying a fresh pot of coffee. She wore a morning gown of dove-grey silk, the colour draining what little warmth the fog allowed into the room. Her pearls were absent. In their place, a single brooch, an enamel saint, Poirot noted, pinned at her throat. "Good morning, gentlemen," she said, her voice bright but brittle, like thin ice over deep water. "I trust the Abbey did not disturb your rest." The bells in the chapel tower sometimes ring of their own accord. Hastings swallowed hastily. "Bells? Didn't hear a thing, though I did dream of monks chasing me with incense burners." Lady Evelyn's laugh was polite. Brother Elias would be horrified. He believes the bells ring only for the dead. She poured coffee with a steady hand, but Poirot observed the faint tremor in her wrist as she replaced the pot. A night of broken sleep, perhaps, or something more. Dr. Marcus Hale lumbered in next, waistcoat buttons straining, a newspaper folded beneath one arm. He greeted the table with a booming morning all. That set the crystal trembling. "Fog's a nuisance. Can't see the dig site from the west wing. Reginald promised me a look at the crypt after breakfast. Says there's a sarcophagus with a false bottom." Poirot buttered a triangle of toast with precision. A false bottom, doctor? Or merely a hopeful imagination? Hale chuckled, spearing a sausage. Both, probably, but hope's a powerful excavator. Miss Clara Voss arrived in a whirlwind of American vitality, her bobbed hair still damp from her bath, a silk kimono trailing behind her like a banner. Uncle Reggie's not down yet? Typical. He was up half the night with that wretched book. She slid into a chair, reaching for the marmalade. I swear the Codex gives him the heebie-jeebies. Last night he kept muttering about betrayers unseen. Lady Evelyn's cup paused halfway to her lips. Reginald is passionate about his work. The Codex is more than a book to him. It's a key. To what? Hastings asked, through a mouthful of kipper. Lady Evelyn set her cup down with care. To understanding, perhaps, or to ruin. A silence settled, broken only by the fountain's soft plink. Poirot sipped his coffee, eyes moving from face to face. Clara's breeziness had slipped, just for a moment. Hale's sausage hovered forgotten on his fork. Even Hastings sensed the shift and kept unusually quiet. The arrival of Monsieur Victorlin smoothed the moment like a hand over rumpled silk. He entered without sound, his morning coat impeccable, a crimson pocket square the only splash of colour. "Bon matin," he murmured, bowing slightly to Lady Evelyn. "I trust the Abbey's ghosts were merciful." "Merciful enough," she replied, "though I confess I heard footsteps in the corridor after midnight. Probably the housemaids." Lange's smile was thin, or the monks returning to claim their own. Brother Elias appeared last, gliding in as though on wheels, his habit brushing the floor. He carried a small wooden bowl of herbs, rosemary and thyme, Poirot noted, and placed it beside the daisies. "For the table," he said softly, "to ward off ill humours." Clara rolled her eyes. "Brother, you're as bad as Uncle Reggie with his curses." The monk's gaze was serene. "Curses are merely prayers spoken backwards, child." Breakfast continued with the polite clink of cutlery and the occasional murmur. Sir Reginald did not appear. At 9:15, Lady Evelyn excused herself to check on him. She returned 5 minutes later, her face composed but pale. "Reginald is indisposed. He asks that we begin the tour without him. Hell join us in the crypt." Hale looked disappointed but resigned. "Scholar's privilege, I suppose. Let's be off, then." The party assembled in the entrance hall, where a footman distributed lanterns despite the hour. The fog made daylight academic. Brother Elias led the way through a side door into the cloisters proper. The air here was colder, damp with centuries of breath and prayer. Their footsteps echoed off the vaulted ceiling. Somewhere, water dripped with monastic patience. "These cloisters were the heart of the original abbey," Elias explained, his voice low. "Monks walked here in silence, meditating on mortality. The carvings you see," he gestured to the stone bosses overhead, "depict the 7 deadly sins. Pride, naturally, is closest to the chapter house." Hastings peered upward. "Jolly grim, though I suppose it kept the fellows in line." They passed beneath an archway into the chapter house, a circular room with a central pillar like the trunk of a stone tree. Benches lined the walls. Above them, faded frescoes showed saints in various attitudes of ecstasy and agony. Poirot lingered over one panel. Saint-Gerard, hands raised, a dagger suspended in mid-air before him. "The betrayal," Elias said quietly. The prior locked himself in his cell to protect the reliquary, yet death entered all the same. The monks believed the devil himself struck the blow. "Or a clever monk with a knowledge of mechanics," Poirot murmured. Elias' eyes met his, unreadable. "Faith and reason are not always enemies, monsieur." From the chapter house, a narrow staircase spiraled downward into the crypt. The air grew colder, thick with the smell of earth and candle smoke. Lanterns cast pools of gold on the stone floor. Shadows leapt and retreated like living things. Sarcophagi lined the walls, their lids carved with effigies of knights and abbots, hands crossed piously over sword or crozier. Dr. Hale made a beeline for the far end, where a plain stone coffin stood slightly apart from the others. "This is the one," he said, running his hands over the lid. "Reginald swears there's a hollow space beneath." He pressed his ear to the stone, tapping with his knuckles. The sound was dull, then tap-tap, hollow. Hale's eyes gleamed. "There! You hear that?" Clara shivered. "It's probably full of bones, or silver," Lange said softly. Poirot moved closer, his lantern revealing faint scratch marks around the lid's edge, recent by the look of them. "Someone has been curious," he observed. Brother Elias crossed himself. The dead should not be disturbed. But Hale was already heaving at the lid with Hastings' enthusiastic assistance. It shifted with a grinding protest, revealing a cavity beneath, Not bones, but a wooden box, iron-bound and padlocked. Hale let out a triumphant whoop. "Reginald will want to see this immediately." As if summoned by the sound, Sir Reginald Beaumont appeared at the foot of the stairs. He looked dishevelled, his beard untrimmed, his eyes red-rimmed, a streak of ink on his cuff. In his hand he clutched a sheet of vellum covered in cramped writing. "Marcus, what the devil?" He stopped, staring at the open sarcophagus. "You've found it!" "Found what?" Clara demanded. Sir Reginald's voice was hoarse. "The reliquary key, or what's left of it." He held up the vellum. "I spent the night translating. The codex. It's not just a record of betrayal. It's a map to something hidden here in the Abbey." Lady Evelyn, who had followed him down, went very still. "Reginald, you promised—" "I promised nothing," he snapped, then softened. "Forgive me, my dear, but this changes everything. The codex speaks of a chamber, sealed since the dissolution. A chamber that can only be opened by one who knows the betrayer's name." Hale was practically vibrating. "And the box?" Sir Reginald knelt, examining the padlock. "Rusted shut. Well need tools." He stood suddenly brisk. "Evelyn, have the footman bring crowbars. Marcus Victor, help me carry this upstairs. The rest of you, back to the house. We'll convene in the library at noon." The party dispersed with a mixture of excitement and unease. Poirot lingered, watching Sir Reginald whisper urgently to Brother Elias. The monk's face was a mask, but his hands clenched at his sides. As they climbed the stairs, Hastings muttered, "Dash it, Poirot! This is getting rum. Hidden chambers, cursed books, feels like we're in one of those penny dreadfuls." Poirot's eyes were thoughtful. Penny dreadfuls, Hastings sometimes contain truths dressed in sensational clothing. Observe how Sir Reginald's passion borders on obsession, and how Lady Evelyn fears what he might find. Back in the conservatory, the fog had begun to lift, revealing the gardens in muted watercolour. The party gathered in the library, where the codex lay waiting on its rosewood cabinet like a patient cat. Sir Reginald arrived with the wooden box, now prized open to reveal, not treasure, but a single iron key, black with age, and a scrap of parchment. "The key to the sealed chamber," he announced, "and this," he unfolded the parchment, "is the final piece of the cipher. The betrayer's name is the lock, the saint's blood the key." Clara laughed nervously. "Saint's blood? That's gruesome." "Symbolic," Hale said. "Probably a reference to the reliquary." Langer examined the key with professional interest. "Medieval workmanship. The ward pattern is unusual." Brother Elias stood apart, near the fireplace. "You would open a door sealed for 400 years. Some things are buried for a reason." Sir Reginald's eyes blazed, and some truths are worth any price. Lunch was a tense affair, cold cuts and salad eaten in near silence. Poirot noted the dynamics shifting like sands, Hale's greed, Langer's calculation, Clara's excitement masking fear, Evelyn's brittle control, Elias' quiet dread. And Sir Reginald was a man standing on the edge of a precipice, smiling. Afterwards the group assembled in the cloister garth. Sir Reginald led them to a recessed archway, its stonework newer than the surrounding cloisters. "The sealed chamber," he said, fitting the iron key into a rusted lock concealed behind a carving of Saint-Gerard. The mechanism groaned, then gave with a hollow clunk. A section of wall swung inward, revealing a narrow staircase spiralling downward into darkness. Dust motes danced in the lantern light. The air smelled of earth and forgotten incense. "Careful," Sir Reginald warned. "The steps are steep." They descended single file. Sir Reginald first, then Hale, Lange, Clara, Evelyn, Hastings, Poirot, with Brother Elias bringing up the rear. The staircase ended in a small chamber, its walls lined with empty niches where reliquaries once stood. In the centre, on a stone plinth, lay a lead casket no larger than a shoebox. Sir Reginald's hands trembled as he lifted the lid. Inside, nestled in rotted silk, was a crystal phial containing a dark viscous liquid. "Saint-Gerard's blood," he whispered, "preserved for centuries." Clara wrinkled her nose. "It's probably just wine." "Or blood," Lange said quietly. Poirot stepped closer, his lantern revealing faint lettering on the casket. "Traditor intramuros, the betrayer within the walls." Sir Reginald closed the casket with reverence. "This proves it. The codex, the key, the blood. All part of a ritual to open the true chamber." There's another lock, hidden deeper. Hale was practically bouncing. "Where?" Sir Reginald pointed to the floor, beneath the high altar in the chapel. "But well need the codex itself. The final cipher is illuminated on the last page." They returned to the library, where Sir Reginald unlocked the cabinet. But the codex was not there. For a moment, no one spoke. Then chaos erupted. Accusations, denials, frantic searching. The cabinet was intact, the lock unforced. The codex had vanished from a locked room. Poirot's voice cut through the noise like a blade. "Silence! The game, mes amis, has begun." Chapter 3. The Locked Chamber. The Crime Discovered. The scream came at 23 minutes past 1 in the morning. A sound so raw it seemed to tear the fog itself. It rose from the upper corridor, ricocheted off vaulted ceilings, and slammed into every sleeping ear like a physical blow. Lady Evelyn Beaumont was first to the door of Sir Reginald's study, her silk dressing-gown clutched tight, hair unbound and wild. She pounded with both fists. "Reginald, open this instant!" Silence answered. Thick, absolute wrong. Poirot arrived barefoot, pyjamas buttoned to the throat, eyes already sharp. Hastings stumbled behind in striped flannel, lantern swinging. The others followed in a ragged parade, Clara in a crimson kimono, Hale clutching a poker, Lange immaculate, even in midnight disarray, Brother Elias murmuring Latin under his breath. The study door was oak, iron-bound, medieval in its solidity. A single key protruded from the inside lock. The bolts, 3 of them, were shot home. No sound from within, no light beneath the door. "Reginald!" Evelyn's voice cracked. She rattled the handle until her knuckles bled. Poirot laid a palm against the wood. "Madam, step back." His voice was calm, but the little grey cells were racing. Hastings? Crowbar! The groundskeeper, roused from his cottage, produced one within minutes. They wedged it beneath the lowest bolt. Wood groaned. Metal shrieked. The door gave with a splintering crash, revealing the room beyond. Sir Reginald Beaumont lay face down across his desk, arms flung wide as though embracing the blotter. A dagger, medieval jewel-hilted, protruded from his back at a perfect right angle. Blood had soaked the green leather, dripped to the turkey rug, and pooled beneath the chair. The codex lay open beside his right hand. Its serpent clasp snapped, pages stained crimson. A single sheet of vellum was pinned beneath his cheek. On it, in Sir Reginald's own hand, 3 words. The room was a sealed box. Windows latched from within, curtains undisturbed. No chimney wide enough for a cat. The only door, the one they had just destroyed, had been bolted on the inside. The key still hung in the lock, untouched. Hastings gagged. Good God! Poirot moved like a surgeon. He touched nothing, yet saw everything. The angle of the dagger impossible for self-infliction. The overturned inkwell spilled after death. The candle burned to a stub time of death between midnight and 1. Footprints in the rug. Only Sir Reginald's. No struggle. No second set of prints. Lady Evelyn sank to her knees, a low animal moan escaping her. Clara turned away, retching. Hale's face was the colour of parchment. Lange's eyes glittered with something unreadable. Brother Elias crossed himself and began the De Profundis. Poirot knelt beside the body. The dagger's hilt bore the Beaumont crest, taken from the display in the great hall. The blade had entered between the shoulder blades, severing the spine. Instant death. The note was in Sir Reginald's handwriting, but the pressure of the quill was uneven, written under duress, perhaps. He stood. Inspector Grimes must be summoned. Until then, no one leaves this room. Grimes arrived at dawn, a florid man with a moustache like a walrus and the imagination of a turnip. He took one look at the bolted door, the latched windows, the dagger in the back, and declared suicide. Poirot's moustache bristled. Suicide, Inspector. A man stabs himself in the back, locks the door from within, and writes a confession he does not sign. No, this is murder. Murder in a room sealed tighter than a pharaoh's tomb. Grimes scratched his head. Then how, Mr. Poirot? That, said Poirot, is what Hercule Poirot will discover. He ordered the room preserved. The body was removed on a stretcher, the dagger bagged, the codex, pages sticky with blood, locked in the rosewood cabinet under Poirot's own seal. The guests were confined to the library under the watchful eye of the groundskeeper's son, a lad built like a shire horse. Poirot stood alone in the study as dawn bled grey through the windows. He measured distances with his pocket rule, examined the bolts oiled, recently used, tested the window latches stiff but intact. He ran a gloved finger along the wainscot, tapped the panelling, listened to the walls. Nothing. Yet something nagged. The candle. It had burned lower than the others in the house. And the ink, still wet when the constable arrived. Death at 12:47, give or take 3 minutes. The scream at 1:23, 36 minutes unaccounted for. He opened the codex with reverence. The blood had soaked through 3 pages, obscuring the cipher. But on the final illuminated leaf, beneath the O, miniature of Saint-Gerard, and the hovering dagger, a new line had been added in fresh ink. The betrayer within the walls. Now, and in the hour of death. Poirot closed the book. The abbey was speaking, but in a language of blood and silence. Downstairs, the suspects waited. Lady Evelyn, dry-eyed now, pearls back around her throat like armour. Clara, chain-smoking Turkish cigarettes. Hale, pacing and muttering about ruined excavations. Lange, polishing his nails with a silk handkerchief. Brother Elias, rosary beads clicking. Poirot entered the library. The fire had burned low. Shadows danced like monks at vespers. Mesdames et messieurs, he said softly, Sir Reginald Beaumont was murdered by someone in this room. The door was locked, the windows barred, yet death walked in, struck, and walked out again, leaving no trace. I ask you now, who among you hated him enough to engineer the impossible? Silence. Then Clara laughed, a brittle sound. We all had reasons, monsieur. Uncle was about to change his will. I was to be cut off for marrying beneath me. Evelyn's pearls were paste. Reggie was selling the real ones to fund his obsession. Hale owed him thousands. Lung was outbid on the codex. Even Brother Elias. Reggie planned to turn the chapel into a museum. Evelyn's voice was ice. And you, Clara, you needed his signature on those trust papers. Hale blustered. Lange smiled thinly. Elias said nothing. Poirot raised a hand. Enough. Motives we have in abundance. Method is the riddle, and method, mes amis, will betray the murderer. Outside, the fog began to lift, revealing the abbey in stark morning light. The dagger's reflection glinted in the windowpane like an accusation. Chapter 4. Threads of Suspicion. Investigation begins. He stood alone in the study at 7:30, sunlight slicing through the broken door like a scalpel. The blood had dried to a black crust. The dagger's absence left a dark starburst on the desk. He knelt, nostrils flaring at the iron scent, then produced a pocket lens. The blade had entered at the 5th intercostal space. Clean, surgical. A right-handed strike, delivered from above. Sir Reginald had been seated, writing, head bent. No defensive wounds, trust then, or surprise. Poirot straightened. The killer was someone he allowed to stand behind him. He moved to the windows, 3 in total, each latched from within, the paint old but undisturbed. He tested the catches, stiff but functional. Outside, the fog had retreated to the tree line. The garden lay sodden and innocent. No footprints beneath the sills. The drop was 20 feet to flagstones. Impossible. The door. The bolts were old iron, oiled within the month. Poirot smelled the linseed. The key still hung inside, its bow engraved with the Beaumont crest. He turned it experimentally, smooth, silent. Whoever locked it had done so from within, then what? Passed through the keyhole like smoke. Hastings entered, carrying coffee and consternation. Grimes is useless, Poirot. Has catalogued the dagger as sharp object and the note as suicide confession. Poirot accepted the cup. Inspector Grimes sees what he expects. We shall see what is. He indicated the desk. Observe, the inkwell overturned after death. See the spatter pattern. The candle burned 43 minutes past midnight. Sir Reginald was alive at 12:30, dead by 1. The scream at 1:23. 36 minutes unaccounted for. He opened the codex. The blood had rendered 3 pages illegible, but the final illumination, the hovering dagger, now bore a fresh annotation in Sir Reginald's hand. In beneath, in a different ink, a fainter, hurried E, Poirot murmured, Evelyn, Elias, or something else? Downstairs, the suspects had been separated into 3 rooms, like misbehaving schoolchildren. Poirot began with Lady Evelyn in the morning room. She sat rigid, pearls tight at her throat, a veil of composure over grief. Madame, you discovered the body. Why were you in the corridor at 1:23? I heard footsteps, she said, voice steady. Reginald often worked late. I went to remind him of his heart medicine. Her fingers touched the brooch at her collar. The door was locked. I panicked. Poirot noted the brooch, enamel saint missing 1 pearl eye. You argued yesterday about money? Her chin lifted. The Abbey bleeds us. Reginald planned to sell the chapel relics, I opposed. Yet you inherit everything. A flicker. Everything mortgaged to the hilt. Next, Dr. Hale in the billiard room, chalking a cue he did not use. I was asleep, he blustered. Heard nothing until the scream. Your room adjoins the study corridor. Convenient. Hale flushed. I owed him 8,000. He threatened exposure. But murder? Absurd. Poirot's eyes flicked to Hale's shoes. Mud on the soles, fresh. You walked the gardens at dawn? Couldn't sleep? Needed air? Miss Clara in the conservatory, among the roses? She smoked defiantly, ash falling on silk. Uncle was cutting me off. My fiancé, artist, no money. I needed his signature on trust papers. But I was in bed. Your room overlooks the west wing. Did you see lights? Nothing. Fog. She stubbed the cigarette. Check my sheets. They're cold. Monsieur Lange in the library, examining a first edition Froissart with professional calm. I smoked in the cloister until 12:40. Alone. Your cigarette ends, Turkish gold band, were found beneath the study window. Lange's smile was thin. I walk when I think. The window was closed. Brother Elias in the chapel, kneeling before the altar. His rosary clicked like bones. I prayed from Compline until Matins. The Lord is my witness. The chapel connects to the crypt, and the crypt to the sealed chamber. Elias' eyes were ancient. Some doors should remain closed. Poirot returned to the study. He lay on the rug, eye level with the blood pool. Something glinted beneath the desk, a single pearl, matching Lady Evelyn's brooch. He pocketed it. Hastings burst in. "Poirot! The dagger! It's gone from the evidence. Table!" Poirot's moustache bristled. Mon Dieu! The killer returns to the scene. They searched. The dagger lay in the umbrella stand by the front door, cleaned, wrapped in a monogrammed handkerchief. "Hail!" Hastings whispered. "Or misdirection." Poirot examined the handkerchief under his lens. A single strand of auburn hair, Clara's shade, planted? He stood in the doorway, recreating the timeline. Sir Reginald locks himself in at midnight, works until 12:30. Killer enters, how? Strikes, exits, locks from within. Impossible, unless he tapped the wainscot. A panel shifted under pressure, revealing a narrow void. Priest's hole, disused. Dust thick, but a single scuff mark. Small, recent. Size 6, perhaps Clara's. But the void led nowhere. Bricked up centuries ago. Red herring. Back in the library, Poirot gathered them. The fire crackled. Outside, rooks wheeled against a clearing sky. Mes amis, we have motives. Inheritance, debt, rivalry, faith. We have clues. The pearl, the hair, the initial. But the room remains locked. The method is the key. He held up the codex. Sir Reginald wrote E before he died. Someone he trusted, or feared. Lady Evelyn touched her brooch, fingers trembling. Hale avoided eyes. Clara lit another cigarette with shaking hands. Lange studied the ceiling. Elias prayed. Poirot's voice was soft steel. The impossible is merely the unconfessed. Tomorrow, we reconstruct the crime. Tonight, no one sleeps alone. He dismissed them. In the corridor, Clara whispered to Hastings, "He's enjoying this." Poirot heard. "Non, mademoiselle. Hercule Poirot enjoys only truth." Alone again, he returned to the study. He sat in Sir Reginald's chair, opened the codex to the bloodied page. Beneath the stain, faint pressure marks, indentations from writing on a sheet above. He held it to the window, the rest obliterated by blood. Poirot closed his eyes. The little grey cells danced. Outside, the Abbey bells tolled 3. Somewhere, a door closed softly. Chapter 5. Echoes of the Past, Clues and Red Herrings. Poirot began the second day with the precision of a watchmaker. At 6:30, he was in the crypt, lantern raised, tracing the spiral staircase the party had descended only 36 hours earlier. The air was colder here, thick with the scent of earth and tallow. He knelt where the wooden box had lain, running gloved fingers over the sarcophagus lid. The scratch marks were deeper than memory. Fresh gouges, made by a chisel or crowbar. Someone had returned after the discovery. He followed the wall to the sealed chamber. The lead casket still rested on its plinth, the crystal phial of saint's blood glinting like a dark ruby. Poirot lifted it carefully. The wax seal was intact, but beneath the casket someone had scratched a tiny cross. New, the stone still powdery. Brother Elias, or a warning? Upstairs, the house stirred. Poirot intercepted the maid carrying breakfast trays. "Tell me, child, who entered the study after the body was removed?" The girl trembled. "No one, sir. Constable's orders." Yet the dagger moved. Her eyes widened. I found a glove on the stairs. Dr. Hale's left it in the laundry." Poirot took the glove, kid leather monogrammed MH, a smear of dried blood on the cuff. Hale had claimed to be in bed. Another lie. In the conservatory, Poirot found Hastings polishing off toast. "Poirot! Grimes is useless. Spent the morning measuring the door for official dimensions. Dimensions will not help. Motives will." Poirot laid the glove on the table. Hale was in the corridor after midnight. Hastings whistled, but the room was locked. Exactly. Poirot summoned the suspects to the chapter house at 9. The circular room felt like a confessional. The carved sins glared down. He placed the glove, the pearl, the auburn hair, and the bloodied handkerchief on the central pillar. Mes amis, we play a game of truths and lies. Each of you will speak, then I will speak. Lady Evelyn entered first, veil lifted, eyes red-rimmed but steady. The pearl is mine! It fell during the struggle to open the door. I did not notice until morning. Poirot nodded. And the initials on the handkerchief? Reginald's. He kept spares in every room. Dr. Hale blustered in next, face florid. That glove was stolen from my room. I lost it days ago, yet the blood is fresh. Hale paled. I cut myself shaving. Miss Clara arrived smoking, ash trembling. The hair is mine, yes. I brushed it in the study yesterday afternoon. Uncle let me read the codex. I must have left strands. Monsieur Lange followed, immaculate. The cigarette ends beneath the window. Mine. I smoked there at 12:30, contemplating the fog. The window was closed. Brother Elias last, rosary in hand. The cross in the crypt. Not mine, but someone prays for forgiveness. Poirot waited until they stood in a tense semicircle. Bon. Now the lies. He held up the codex. Sir Reginald wrote E before death. Lady Evelyn, you feared the will. Dr. Hale, you owed 8,000. Mademoiselle Clara, your trust. Monsieur Lange, the codex itself. Brother Elias, the chapel's future. Yet the room was locked. He turned to the wall fresco. Saint-Gerard, the hovering dagger. The abbey has secrets older than murder. He pressed the saint's eye. A panel clicked. A narrow staircase spiraled upward behind the wall. Dusty, disused, but with fresh scuff marks on the third step. Size 6 again. The priest's hole, Hastings breathed. Poirot led them up. The staircase ended in the study floor, a trapdoor beneath the rug concealed by a false knot. The hinges were oiled. Someone had used it. But the trapdoor opened only from below. From the study side, it was bolted. Solid oak, no handle. To lock the room from within, the killer would need to descend, bolt the door, then return how? Red herring. Poirot descended, thoughtful. The method is not the passage is the distraction. In the great hall, he gathered the staff. The footman admitted seeing Miss Clara in the west corridor at 12:15 carrying a candle. Said she couldn't sleep. Clara flushed. I went to the library for a book. The librarian confirmed. A volume of Poe, returned at 12:20. Poirot's eyes narrowed. 12:15 to 12:20. 5 minutes. The study was adjacent. Possible. Lunch was silent. Poirot observed. Hale drank 3 glasses of claret, hands shaking. Lange sketched the abbey's floor plan on a napkin. Clara picked at her food. Evelyn stared at the codex cabinet. Elias prayed over his soup. Afterwards, Poirot and Hastings searched the west wing. In Clara's room, they found a spool of fine wire, séance trickery, and a letter from her fiancé, postmarked yesterday. Darling, I arrive tonight. Trust fund or no, well, elope. Hastings whistled. Motive or desperation? In Hale's room, ledgers showing debts of 12,000, not 8. A forged letter from Sir Reginald forgiving the debt, yes, dated tomorrow. In Lange, a set of lockpicks and a photograph of the codex clasp, annotated in red ink. In Evelyn's, a second will, unsigned, leaving everything to a distant cousin. In Elias' cell, a hidden drawer containing a medieval key, matching the sealed chamber's lock. Poirot gathered them in the cloister garth at dusk. The fountain played. Roses bled petals into the water. Mes amis, the clues multiply like rabbits. The glove, the hair, The wire, the debts, the will, the key. Yet the room remains locked. He held up the crystal phial. Saint's blood, or wine, or poison. He uncorked it. The scent was sharp. Belladonna. Hastings gasped. Poison! Enough to kill a horse. Sir Reginald's heart medicine, digitalis, was replaced with this. Evelyn swayed. He took it at midnight. Poirot nodded. The dagger was the flourish, the poison the method. But the room... He stopped. The fountain's plink had changed, irregular. He knelt, lifted the basin's grate. Beneath, a thin tube ran into the crypt, Abbey's old speaking tube, used by monks to communicate between chapel and cell. He blew into it. A faint echo returned from the study fireplace. The killer spoke to Sir Reginald through the tube, convinced him to take the medicine, then entered via the priest's hole, stabbed him, exited, locked the door from within using a string through the keyhole, pulled from below. He demonstrated with twine. The key turned, the bolt slid, the room locked from within by someone already outside. Silence. Then Clara laughed hysterically. Impossible! Poirot's eyes were steel. Impossible is a word for the guilty. He turned to the group. Tomorrow, we reconstruct. Tonight, the tube is sealed. As they dispersed, Poirot lingered by the fountain. He lifted the grate fully. The tube ended in a small brass mouthpiece, smeared with lipstick. Clara's shade, red herring, or confession. The Abbey bells tolled 6. Somewhere, a door creaked open. Chapter 6. Veils of deception, interrogating suspects. Deeper Poirot gathered them at moonrise in the chapter house, the carved sins leering by, candlelight. The speaking tube lay coiled on the pillar like a dead serpent. Mes amis, the poison was belladonna in digitalis vials. The dagger entered after death to mislead. The tube delivered the voice of trust. Who spoke? He began with Lady Evelyn. She stood pale beneath pride. Reginald took his medicine at midnight. I prepared it myself, digitalis only. Poirot produced the crystal phial. Yet this came from your dressing table. She faltered. I keep belladonna for migraines, and the unsigned will disinheriting Clara? Her silence was answer. Dr. Hale next, beneath gluttony. I forged the debt forgiveness. Reginald discovered it at 11:30. We argued. He threatened exposure. Your glove in the corridor? Planted. I was in the crypt, searching the reliquary. Poirot held up a chisel, Hale's fingerprints in wax. Clara beneath envy, eyes defiant. Yes, I used the tube. At 12:15 I whispered through it, Uncle, open the door, it's urgent, he refused. I went to the library for Poe. The lipstick on the mouthpiece? Seance trick. I tested the tube earlier. Her fiancé's letter. Arrival midnight. Jealousy confirmed. Languor beneath avarice. Smile razor thin. I photographed the codex clasp to forge a duplicate. I needed the original. At 12:40, I was beneath the study window, smoking, listening. He produced a wax impression of the cabinet key. Brother Elias last, beneath sloth, though his eyes burned. I knew the tube's path. I prayed in the chapel, but at 12:30 I heard Reginald cry out. I did not intervene. Poirot held the medieval key. This opens the sealed chamber. You plan to hide the codex there. Preserve the Abbey's sanctity. Elias bowed his head. Faith is not murder. Poirot stepped into the circle's centre. 5 voices. One convinced Sir Reginald to take poison. One entered via priest's hole. One locked the door with string. One planted clues. One watched. He lifted the codex. The bloodied page now revealed, under reagent, a final line. Forgive them, they know not, cut off by the dagger. Hastings gasped. He forgave his killer, none. He forgave the house. Poirot's gaze swept them. Tomorrow, dawn, we reconstruct every second. The tube will speak again. Outside, the fountain's song stopped. A single petal drifted into the basin, blood red. Chapter 7. Dark Revelations, Complications and Twists. Dawn painted the cloisters rose gold, but the chapter house remained cold. Poirot had arranged 5 chairs in a pentagon, the speaking tube coiled at the centre like a noose. The suspects entered one by one. Evelyn veiled, Hale sweating claret, Clara chain-smoking, Lang polishing cufflinks, Elias rosary in hand. Hastings stood guard at the door. Inspector Grimes, finely useful, took notes. Poirot began without preamble. Last night we traced the tube from fountain to fireplace. It ends behind the study grate, accessible only by removing the fireback. Someone did so at 12:27 a.m. He produced the fireback, soot-smudged, a single auburn, hair clung to the iron Clara's. Clara crushed her cigarette. I told you, I tested it earlier. Poirot turned to Evelyn. Madame, your belladonna vial empty. Yet Sir Reginald's medicine glass held digitalis only. Explain. Evelyn's voice was ice. I refilled it myself at 11. Someone switched the bottles after. Hale interrupted. I saw Lang in the corridor at 12:10, carrying a dark bottle. Lange's smile never wavered. Claret for my nerves. Poirot held up the crystal phial, now half full. Belladonna. Fingerprints, Hale's on the outside, Evelyn's inside the neck. A conspiracy. Evelyn gasped. Hale went crimson. Poirot pressed on. The priest's hole trap door, bolted from the study side. The string through the keyhole, pulled from below. But the bolt required a second string, tied off on the fountain grate. Clara's wire spool matches the gauge. Clara laughed shrilly. Séance tricks! Poirot produced the Poe book from the library, pages dog-eared at the telltale heart. A bookmark, a train ticket, London to Wiltshire, dated yesterday, name J. Blackwood, Clara's fiancé. He arrived at 12:05, Poirot said. Footprints in the cloister mud. Size 10, artist's boots. He waited in the sealed chamber. Clara paled. He came to elope, or to kill. Poirot turned to Elias. You heard Reginald cry out at 12:30, yet you stayed in the chapel. Why? Elias' voice was stone. I believed it penance. He planned to sell the altar cross, melt it for cash. Poirot lifted the medieval key. This opens the reliquary niche behind the altar. You moved the codex there at 12:45, after the murder. Elias bowed his head. To protect it. Poirot stepped into the Pentagon's heart. Reconstruction silence. Then Evelyn whispered. He was already dead when the dagger. Poirot's eyes blazed. A pact. 5 murderers, 1 corpse. But only one struck the blow. He turned to Clara. Your fiancé! Where is he? Clara's cigarette fell. He left at 1. Said it was too dangerous. Poirot signalled Hastings. The sealed chamber, now. They descended. The lead casket lay open, empty. On the plinth, a fresh note in Blackwood's hand. Poirot's moustache twitched. Non, the codex is bait. He lifted the crystal phial, now glowing faintly. Inside, not blood, but luminous paint. Blackwood had switched it, planning to sell the real relic. The Abbey bells tolled 7. Outside, a motor car roared to life, Blackwood fleeing. Poirot smiled grimly. The chase begins. Chapter 8. Hidden passages, further discoveries. The motor car's roar faded into the Wiltshire lanes before Hastings could reach the front door. Poirot stood on the Abbey steps, coat unbuttoned, eyes narrowed against the dawn glare. The gravel was scarred by fresh tyre tracks, wide, deep, a Daimler or Bentley. Blackwood had planned his exit. Mon ami, Poirot said, voice calm but edged, the sealed chamber, now. They descended in a rush. Poirot, Hastings, Grimes, and the 5 suspects under guard. The crypt air hit like a slap. Cold, damp, smelling of betrayal. The lead casket lay open. the crystal phial gone. On the plinth, Blackwood's note fluttered in the draught. Poirot knelt. Lantern raised, the floor showed scuff marks. Size 10 boots, mud from the cloister garth. A second set, smaller, Clara's evening slippers, overlapping. She had been here after the murder. "Clara," Poirot said softly, "you helped him carry the codex." She lit a cigarette with shaking fingers. "He said we'd sell it in Paris. Start fresh." Evelyn's veil slipped. "You little fool." Poirot ignored her. He traced the wall behind the plinth. His fingers found a hairline crack, stone on stone, medieval joinery. He pressed. A section swung inward on concealed hinges, revealing a tunnel barely shoulder wide, shored with ancient oak. Dust lay thick, but a single set of footprints, Blackwood's, led away, the codex serpent clasp glinting where it had scraped the wall. "The true passage," Poirot murmured. "The sealed chamber was a blind. This leads to the old monk's postern, outside the walls." Hastings whistled. "Hez halfway to London by now. No, the fog is lifting. He will stick to back roads." Poirot turned to Grimes. "Telephone the county constabulary. Roadblocks at Mere and Shaftesbury. The car is a dark green Bentley. Registration XB447. I saw it in the garage ledger." Grimes lumbered off. Poirot led the others into the tunnel. The air grew fouler. Mould, rat droppings, the faint sweetness of belladonna. After 50 yards, the passage forked. Left, a bricked-up arch, mortar fresh. Right, continued footprints deeper now, Blackwood running. Poirot knelt at the fork. A scrap of vellum lay discarded, torn from the codex, the betrayal miniature. On the reverse, in Blackwood's hurried scrawl, "Meet at the tithe barn. Midnight, $50,000 or the curse awakens." "An accomplice," Poirot said. "Someone inside." They pressed on. The tunnel narrowed, then opened into a cavernous space. The tithe barn's undercroft, hidden beneath what was now the Abbey's herb garden. Moonlight filtered through a grate above. The Bentley's engine ticked as it cooled in the shadows. Blackwood had doubled back. Hastings drew his service revolver. "Hez here." Poirot signalled silence. They crept forward. The codex lay on a crate, open to the bloodied page. Beside it, the crystal phial, now glowing faintly, luminous paint confirmed. Blackwood had staged the saint's blood all along. A shadow moved behind the crates. Poirot stepped into the moonlight. "Monsieur Blackwood, the game is up." The artist emerged, dishevelled, a Webley revolver trembling in his hand. "Stay back, Poirot. The codex is mine." Clara sobbed. "Jack, don't—" He ignored her. "Reginald was a fool. The codex is worth a fortune. Decoded. It's a map to the Templar hoard beneath the chapel. I needed him alive to finish the translation. When he refused, You poisoned him," Poirot finished, with Hale's belladonna, delivered by Clara's voice through the tube. "You entered via the priest's hole, stabbed the corpse for drama, exited through this passage." Clara locked the door with wire. "Elias hid the codex here to protect it. Evelyn and Hale provided alibis and debts. Langer forged the buyer's note to lure you." Blackwood's laugh was bitter. "Clever Belgian, but I still have the gun." He raised the Webley. Hastings cocked his revolver. Stalemate. Poirot's voice was silk. "Shoot, and the county police arrive in minutes. Surrender, and you live." Blackwood wavered. Then, from the shadows, Brother Elias stepped forward, medieval key in hand. "The Templar hoard is a lie. I bricked it up centuries ago, after the last monk died guarding it. The codex is a warning, not a map." He inserted the key into a rusted lock on the crate. It opened to reveal, not gold, but a skeleton in monk's robes, a dagger in its back, the original betrayal. Blackwood's hand shook. The Webley clattered to the stone. Grimes burst in with constables. Blackwood was cuffed. Clara collapsed sobbing. Hale blustered denials. Evelyn stood silent, pearls finely still. Lange pocketed his lockpicks with a shrug. Elias knelt by the skeleton, murmuring Latin. Poirot lifted the codex, the bloodied page now readable under lantern light. Traditor intramuros. The betrayer is greed. He closed it gently. The abbey has spoken. Outside, the sun rose fully, gilding the fog to gold. The Bentley was impounded, the passage sealed. The suspects were led away. Clara for conspiracy, Hale for poison, Evelyn for accessory, Lange for theft, Elias for obstruction, Blackwood for murder. Poirot stood in the herb garden, inhaling rosemary and thyme. Hastings joined him, all of them Poirot. No, one killer, 5 accomplices. Greed wore many faces. The abbey bells tolled 8, clear, unafraid. Chapter 9. The grey cells awaken, the revelation. Poirot gathered them in the great hall at noon, beneath the tapestry of Saint-Gerard. The suspects sat in a semicircle, Clara pale and tear-streaked, Hale sweating, Evelyn rigid, Lange immaculate, Elias serene. Blackwood stood cuffed between 2 constables, the codex on the table before him like a silent accuser. Hastings guarded the door. Inspector Grimes took frantic notes. Poirot began without flourish. Mesdames et messieurs, the impossible has been explained. The locked room, the poison, the dagger, the passage, all pieces of a puzzle crafted by greed. But only one hand struck the fatal blow. He opened the codex to the bloodied page. Under ultraviolet light, borrowed from Hale's archaeological kit, the obscured text glowed. Sir Reginald was poisoned at 12:30 with belladonna supplied by Dr. Hale, delivered in digitalis vials prepared by Lady Evelyn. The voice through the speaking tube belonged to Clara, luring him to drink. Monsieur Lange signalled from the garden with his lighter. 3 flashes, the prearranged sign. Brother Elias heard the cry but did nothing, believing it divine justice. Jack Blackwood entered via the priest's hole at 12:37, stabbed the already dead man, and exited through the hidden passage to the tithe barn undercroft. He paused, letting the silence settle like dust. But this was not murder. It was theatre. Sir Reginald died at 12:30. The dagger at 12:37 was superfluous. The locked room was a stage, the codex the prop. The true crime was theft. He lifted the crystal phial, now revealed as luminous paint, not blood. Blackwood staged the saint's blood to inflate the codex value. He forged the Templar hoard legend, using Hale's debts, Clara's desperation, Evelyn's fear of ruin, Lange's greed, and Elias' guilt over the chapel's sale. Each played their part, believing they controlled the script. Blackwood sneered. "Clever, Poirot, but you can't prove." Poirot produced the torn vellum from the tunnel. "Your note, meet at the tithe barn. Midnight, $50,000. The buyer was fictional, Lange's forgery. The real plan, sell the codex in Paris, split the proceeds." But Sir Reginald discovered the forgery at 11:45. He confronted Hale, who confessed to the plot. Reginald locked himself in to decode the final cipher, proof of the hoax. He turned to the codex clasp. The serpent devours its tail, Ouroboros, a symbol of false eternity. Blackwood added it last year, when he first photographed the original in Sir Reginald's study. The bloodied page? Staged with pig's blood from the kitchen, tested by Poirot's reagent. Clara sobbed. He said it was harmless. Harmless! Poirot's eyes flashed. A man died of poison. The dagger was the curtain call. He stepped to the fireplace, removed the grate. The speaking tube ended in a brass mouthpiece, smeared with Clara's lipstick, but also Hale's fingerprints in belladonna residue. Hale prepared the poison. Evelyn switched the vials. Clara spoke the fatal words. "Uncle, it's Clara. Open the door. him frightened. He trusted her, drank, collapsed. Blackwood entered, stabbed, exited. Clara pulled the strings from the fountain. Wire through keyhole and bolt, tied off on the grate. The door locked from within. Impossible, yet simple. He demonstrated with twine and wire. The key turned, the bolt slid, the door locked itself. Evelyn whispered, "He was already dead." "Exactly," Poirot said. "The dagger was Blackwood's flourish, to create the locked room mystery, distract from the poison." Elias moved the codex to the undercroft to protect it, unaware he completed the theft. He turned to Blackwood. "You returned at dawn via the passage, left the note, drove off in the Bentley, thinking the police would chase a fleeing murderer, not a thief." But the tire tracks led back to the tithe barn. The skeleton? A 14th century monk murdered for the same greed. History repeats. Blackwood lunged uselessly. "The codex is still mine." Poirot opened it to the final page. Beneath the illumination, in Sir Reginald's dying hand, "Forgive them, they know not." The rest obliterated by blood. But beneath, in ultraviolet, "The hoard is dust. The Templar treasure was melted down in 1540, Poirot said. "The codex warns against greed, not guides. To gold. You killed for a lie." Silence. Then Elias spoke, voice ancient. The betrayer within the walls was always avarice. Poirot closed the book. Justice Grimes snapped cuffs. The suspects were led away, Clara weeping, Hale blustering, Evelyn silent, Lange resigned, Elias praying. Blackwood spat curses. Poirot stood alone with Hastings as the hall emptied. Sunlight streamed through the windows, gilding the tapestry. "All of them, Poirot. Non. One killer, 5 fools. The Abbey endured." He placed the codex in the rosewood cabinet, locked it with Sir Reginald's key. The secret was never fatal. Only the greed that sought it. Outside, the fountain sang again. The rosemary scent rose. The bells tolled 10, clear, unafraid. Chapter 10. Dawn of Justice. Justice served. The great hall of Saint-Gerard Abbey stood empty, save for Hercule Poirot and Captain Hastings. The tapestry of Saint-Gerard glowed in the late afternoon light, the saint's eyes serene at last. The codex rested in its rosewood cabinet, locked, blood-stained pages sealed like a confession. Outside, the fountain played its patient song. Rosemary and thyme scented the air. The fog was gone. The abbey breathed. Inspector Grimes had departed with his prisoners an hour earlier. The county constabulary van, black, grim, official, had crunched down the gravel drive, taking Clara Voss, Dr. Marcus Hale, Lady Evelyn Beaumont, Monsieur Victor Lange, Brother Elias, and Jack Blackwood to face charges in Salisbury. Clara wept silently, her crimson kimono replaced by a grey prison cloak. Hale blustered to the end, claiming scholarly privilege. Evelyn walked with head high, pearls confiscated as evidence. Lange pocketed a final cigarette, unlit. Elias carried his rosary, murmuring mea culpa. Blackwood alone cursed, his artist's hands cuffed behind him. Poirot stood at the window, watching the van disappear. "Justice, Hastings," he said softly, "is never tidy, but it is served." Hastings joined him, hands in pockets. "All of them, Poirot. Even Lady Evelyn, especially Lady Evelyn." She supplied the belladonna, knowing its use. Grief does not absolve complicity. Poirot turned from the window. "And Brother Elias, he hid the codex believing he protected the abbey's soul. Faith, like greed, can blind." The front door opened. A young constable entered, cap in hand. "Begging your pardon, sir. The wills, Sir Reginald's last one, found in the study safe, leaves everything to the National Trust, on condition the abbey becomes a museum. Lady Evelyn's unsigned draft is void." Poirot nodded. Sir Reginald's final act, preserving the abbey from the very greed that killed him. The constable departed. Hastings poured 2 glasses of port from the decanter. Sir Reginald's last bottle, untouched since the night of the murder. To the old boy, he said, raising his glass. He outwitted them even in death. Poirot clinked glasses. To truth, and to the little grey cells. They drank. The port was rich, dark, forgiving. In the cloister garth, the sealed passage had been bricked up by masons under Poirot's supervision. The speaking tube was removed, its brass mouthpiece melted down. The priest's hole trapdoor was bolted shut, the rug replaced. The study, now stripped of blood and tragedy, was locked, the key given to the trust. The dagger, the wire, the crystal phial of luminous paint, all catalogued, labelled, stored in evidence boxes. Poirot walked the cloisters one last time. The carved sins overhead seemed less menacing in daylight. He paused beneath pride, where Evelyn had stood, beneath gluttony, where Hale had sweated, beneath envy, where Clara had smoked. Each sin, he murmured, played its part. But the greatest sin was believing the codex held gold. It held only a mirror. Hastings followed, hands behind his back. And the skeleton in the undercroft? A 14th century monk, murdered for the same lie. The abbey has always devoured its betrayers. They entered the chapel. Sunlight streamed through the stained glass rose window, painting the altar in jewelled colours. Brother Elias' cell was empty. His few possessions, rosary, Bible, a sprig of dried rosemary, left for the trust. On the altar, a new plaque had been placed. Poirot bowed his head, requiescat in pace. Outside, the Bentley, impounded, its dark green paint scratched from the chase, stood in the carriage house. The tyre tracks had been photographed, the engine oil tested. Blackwood's Webley was bagged, the forged buyer's note filed. The case was closed. As the sun dipped, Poirot and Hastings prepared to leave. The Daimler waited, engine purring. Poirot paused at the abbey door, gloved hand on the ancient oak. This place, Hastings, has seen 6 centuries of prayer and betrayal. Today, it chooses prayer. Hastings smiled. Jolly good show, old chap, though ill miss the old pile. Poirot's moustache twitched. You will miss the port, mon ami. They descended the steps. The gravel crunched beneath their feet. Poirot's patent leather Hastings brogues. The gates stood open. Beyond, the Wiltshire hills rolled golden under a clearing sky. Poirot turned for one last look. The abbey stood serene, its Gothic arches framed by yew trees. The fountain's song carried on the breeze. The little grey cells, he said, have done their work. Now, the abbey rests. The Daimler pulled away. In the rear-view mirror, Saint-Gerard Abbey grew smaller, then vanished around a bend. The bells tolled 4, soft, distant, at peace.